Hi, my dearest family. Today we are going to be talking about Mercury retrograde in your natal chart. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about is because often we think that Mercury retrograde in our chart is actually really bad, but it has got a lot of talent that it might be able to offer you. So that's one of the reasons. And I also prepared previously a video on Uranus and its deeper meaning. So if you haven't listened to that video yet, you might want to be considering checking it out. It's a good 55-minute video, but it gives you a lot of insight about what Uranus might indicate in your natal chart. And I hope this teaching style suits you and you like it. And if you do so, then you might want to consider joining my membership program, where you can watch as many webinars as you want, depending on which tier you choose. And you can watch them as long as you wish to. So one of the reasons why it's good to be talking about Mercury retrograde right now is because we are in a retrograde period. And often during retrograde periods, I tend to get a lot of emails. Oh, is it easier for people who have got Mercury retrogrades? Oh, I was born with Mercury retrograde and it's super hard. So let me just talk to you about, why Mercury retrograde or how Mercury retrograde could function really well in your chart. I think it get an unfair, bad reputation, and especially in modern pop astrology, it is often treated like a lifelong communication curse, which completely misses the nuance of how the planetary retrogrades actually function in a birth chart. So, just a quick astronomical side note. 18 to 20% of the population are born with Mercury retrograde. So, meaning that, many people have no issue with their, way of thinking or the way they communicate. But I'm going to give you some very technical details. So, some bits here are a little bit more advanced. And some of them are going to be very suitable for just the casual listeners as well. So, roughly 1 in 5 people were born with Mercury retrograde. And the reason being is because it never travels too far away from the sun. So the very maximum distance Mercury creates with the sun is about 29 degrees. So if you have got a Pisces sun, it means that Mercury's free possible position is Pisces, Aries, or Aquarius. And instead of looking at Mercury as a broken Mercury, a retrograde placement is simply different cognitive operating system. So I'm going to be approaching Mercury from an operating system point of view. Yes, retrogression often means that it's internalized rather than projected outwards. But some of the very positive meanings of Mercury retrograde, the thinking is um, it's a deep processor. It's a non-linear, lateral way of thinking. These people often not thinking, they don't think from A to B to C. They think from A to Z and then to M, for example. So this allows them to make intuitive leaps and to be able to connect the dots that direct Mercury people sometimes miss. Because retrogression means review and research. So think of it as a mastery of those two fields. It's about re-evaluating, revisiting certain type of subjects. But the more you do that, it's going to become something like a talent in your chart. So that's why these people often are gifted at research, editing, or deep diving into certain type of complex subjects because they are able to catch the details over the gloss or details like they catch the details others kind of gloss over. Or I would say that these people are also introspective as well. Often they have got this very rich kind of inner mental landscape. They rarely take things at face value and they kind of prefer to chew on information for a while. And that could be leading to some psychological insights that they might be able to gain. They might even, because they might be struggling verbalizing something immediately. So often they excel at other forms of communication, such as writing, art, music. Obviously, you have to be looking at where Mercury is in your natal chart. So if you were born with a Mercury retrograde in Pisces, most likely it's going to be with the music that you can excel at. But with Mercury in Gemini being retrograde, that would be the writing element. Yes, there is a bit of a danger. You keep going over and over what you have written and then you re-edit it, but because you want to create a masterpiece. Yes, with Mercury retrograde, that could be a bottleneck as well. It could be showing, for example, delayed processing in real time. Especially if that Mercury is in a high stress or fast-paced conversations or environment. There could be a bit of a mental lag there. And again, that perfection element might indicate that I want to be able to give the perfect answer. So imagine Mercury retrograde going to this pageant show, for example, where they are asking you some personalized question, and then maybe you kind of freeze down a little bit. But hours later, you know what it reminds me of as a Mercury retrograde? If anyone has seen the Miss Congeniality part one, where she's at a pageant contest and she's very quick with replying to questions, but the actual winner, Cheryl, she has got a perfect answer to what she would do on a date or on a romantic date, but she just gives a very silly answer because she freezes there. So that could be one of the type of negative meanings of that Mercury retrograde. Yes, it could indicate early life communication hurdles as well. It's very common that, for example, speech delays, extreme shyness, for example, feeling misunderstood during childhood, or you were studying something at school and then you didn't grasp the concept as quick as others would have. But because you revisit those topics, by the time you grow up, you are going to be a lot better than those students have ever been, basically. There is this introspective nature to Mercury retrograde. So it's very easy to tip over into overthinking and rumination. And, so you can get stuck in a mental loop, basically, agonizing over and over again what was said and done. What did they mean by that? And then it could cause a lot of self-doubt. And maybe it brings also up the topic of translation issues. On one hand, I misunderstand easily what others are saying to me, or you are kind of like mixing up your internal thoughts and what actually your kind of mouth says. So it's sometimes the ability to translate those thoughts into spoken words could become a challenge. What's very important to remember is that every single planet tries to teach us something and tries to function in their bestest possible way. So even, when I hear that, oh, Saturn is super difficult, yes, it is difficult, but it makes us more resilient through those difficulties. Remember, retrograde planets are all about repeating something to master its ability. That's very much about the evolutionary or the karmic perspective of retrograde planets. The idea that the energy isn't blocked is just kind of like enrolled in a master class. And if you start thinking about this way, about the retrograde planets this way, then I think it might be more, or easier to understand. It says that it cannot be taken for granted, or you cannot operate something on an autopilot, basically. So the universe essentially forces you to do it over until you get it exactly right. So from the principle point of view, the very prefix of retrograde is re. So it's redo, review, reflect, revise, repair. So with Mercury retrograde, we are not meant to just learn something once and then move on. We are meant to be learning, circling back from time to time, digging deeper with each pass until you understand the architecture of that concept, of that subject, of that sentence that left your mouth, and so forth. Yes, there is going to be an initial deficit coming with it. Like I said, Mercury retrograde often represents this early life frustration, like, you were silenced, especially in water signs. You were struggling to articulate your thoughts and your feelings. Let's say if Mercury is in the sign of Cancer. And then you have to work twice as hard to figure out the communication that actually works for you. But once you have done that, oh wow, it becomes super good. Mercury retrograde is a bit like a late bloomer. Um, you become the ultimate authority in that domain that Mercury rules or in the domain where Mercury is placed in your chart. Maybe a direct Mercury is going to be a quick talker, especially in the sign of Aries or Gemini, for example. But the retrograde Mercury, you become that master novelist, for example, the master runner in the sign of Aries, the meticulous researcher, for example, if it's in the sign of Scorpio or Virgo, or you're going to become that profound orator because you have spent a lifetime deliberately practicing how to bridge your internal world and your external one. So I don't look at retrograde planets anymore as a penalty. It's more of an assignment. It requires you not to just use the tool, the Mercurian tools, to kind of take them apart because it rules Virgo as well, but understand every gear and every spring in that motorcycle or car, and then the ability to put them back together. So I would say that if someone was born, with Mercury retrograde, one of the things that you might want to be looking at is when Mercury is actually turning direct, for example, by secondary progression in your chart. So secondary progression is when one day after birth equals 1 year of your life. And, Mercury retrograde happens by transit approximately 3 or 4 times a year, and each time it's going to be about 3 weeks. So, therefore, I would say that every single of us born with Mercury retrograde will experience it turning direct by progression at some point in your life. And many of us will experience Mercury actually turning retrograde, even if you were born with a direct Mercury. So when that shift occurs, that's basically a communicative awakening, a cognitive awakening. All that forced repetition for mastery suddenly pays off. So when it goes station direct by progression, you know, basically before Mercury actually moves direct, it slows down to a halt in the progress chart. And this could last for about a year or two. And this is often a period when you have got this mental pressure, a profound pivot in how you view the world. It is the culmination of that lifelong masterclass connected to Mercury activities such as communication, siblings, and so forth. Previously you have gathered everything, but now it's about completely having to review what you have learned, especially internally, because you have to be ready to bring it forward. So you can think of Mercury going direct is more of a release valve. It's a cognitive relief. Those trapped thoughts is going to kind of start vanishing, and maybe it's going to be a lot easier to express your complex, your lateral thoughts with more clarity, with more speed. You were doing a lot of research, so maybe this is when you are ready to kind of publish it with Mercury. Maybe you find your voice. Maybe it's a new voice. It's very common actually to completely change your career path. For example, start writing and stuff like that, because Mercury is the ruler of Virgo as well. So it is connected to some work related matters also. Or maybe all those childhood insecurities surrounding communication, speech, learning, starts dissolving entirely. So, in a way, I would say that Mercury retrograde people experience the best of both worlds, basically. Because you were born with some challenges, but you master it, and then once it goes direct, you become somehow an expert of it. Now, the technical bits that I wanted to talk to you about is it does matter what part of the Mercury retrogression you were born with. Because it could be the very beginning and it could be the very late part of it as well. And this is where I get a little bit technical. So if that doesn't make sense, because you would need to be able to read a bit of an ephemeris for that. But I think this is very overlooked distinctions in the natal chart because the phase of that retrogression basically alters the flavor, the psychological weight, the life trajectory of that Mercury placement. So if you were born at the early phase of Mercury retrograde, which means that your Mercury is ahead of the Sun, and it's about a good 25 to 29 degree away from the sun. So what does that mean? Let's say you've got Sun in Pisces and then Mercury is in Aries. So let's say Pisces 20 degrees Sun and Mercury is going to be around, let's say, 15 degree of Aries or 20 degree of Aries. So it means that you were born with a, most likely a Mercury retrograde at the very beginning of that. Now, this is the strongest kind of Mercury limitations, the most possible one, because this is when Mercury is kind of like descending into the underworld. And imagine this as you swimming against the current, uh, like the very strong waves. So the internal mental pressure is incredibly dense with these positions because you were in the you were somehow almost at the external part of Mercury, but now you are forced to go back to that internal processing. It's very fresh, basically. So these people are often skeptics, critiques, yeah, deep dive researchers, they are built to question the status quo, doubt everything, because they were born at the same time when the cosmos mind said, oh, let's look at it again. And not to mention that this time around, Mercury is super slow as well, which I'm going to touch base on in a short while. If you were born somewhere in the middle phase, which is the new Mercury, and basically that's the inferior conjunction between the Sun and Mercury, meaning that they are going to be in the same sign, and the Sun and Mercury are super close to each other. So you were kind of born around the absolute midpoint of the retrograde cycle. Let's say you're about 5 degrees on each side from the Sun. Then, then I would say that this has started the purification process. This is getting illuminated by the heart of the sun. So these people are often more focused on something new. I would say that these people are kind of like geniuses. They are highly intuitive, prophetic thinkers. They don't process information sequentially. They receive downloads. They have got concepts. They are original thinkers. Because their mental operating system was seated at the very heart of the solar system. So they are even more forward looking, even with a Mercury retrograde. And if you were born at the late phase of that Mercury retrograde, so meaning that, let's say your sun is in Pisces, but Mercury is in Aquarius, then, your Mercury retrograde has almost finished. So yes, Mercury is slowing down here to a halt, again preparing for a pivotal moment. It's preparing to move forward. So this manifests like you are on the verge of a mental breakthrough, an intellectual breakthrough. These people finally gonna start speaking and publishing their ideas, and the information is more distilled, more polished, more ready for kind of like public consumptions. Um, and of course, it means that Mercury will turn direct in your chart, potentially just a few years after you were born anyway. So it's going to be happening somewhere in your childhood, maybe in the first 10 years of your life, depending on, of course, exactly on the degrees. So, looking at it from that mind operating system point of view, imagine Mercury retrograde being a software update. Um, so if we were born, with that post-stationing part of the chart, this is when Mercury stations retrograde. It starts picking up the backward momentum and then moves back towards the sun. So it means that Mercury is still in an evening star. So this is going to be a Mercury who focuses a little bit more on the past and thinking about the past. So these people are more analytical, more deconstructive mindset that they have got. This is an operating system that wants to find the flaws, the errors, the inconsistencies in existing information. These people don't accept data at face value. They potentially do a bit of a research about that concept. Now when we have got that middle section there, within about, let's say, about a good 8 degree from the sun, before the exact conjunction happens, then often the mind is overwhelmed by the ego, kind of like that solar consciousness. So these people are very subjective. These people process information through a personal lens, but they are still very imaginative. But maybe they have got certain issues with objective detachment. And then if you were born at that post-conjunction type of phase, the operating system is kind of like continuously creating or writing a new code. It is still in a closed internal testing environment, but it's almost ready. So these people are more innovative. So now the speed of Mercury matters a lot as well, because Mercury loves being fast. And then if Mercury is the operating system, if you have got a slow operating system, then, basically you get very frustrated. You're going to hit that laptop and you're going to throw it away, right? You're going to want to buy a new one. So when Mercury is in the 0 to very slow, then that would indicate that basically Mercury is barely moving. So it means that that cognitive pace of Mercury is kind of like the deep drilling phase. So it doesn't move from one topic to another. It just bears down heavily on one specific area of focus, and then they are concentrating on that, and then they are doing some deep research about it. So their positive manifestation is the concentration there. If we are born somewhere around that inferior conjunction that I have spoken about, it means that it has got the maximum speed, which could be about 2.2 degree a day. And that processor is yeah, like it's overworking basically. The mind is racing, making connections, processing data at a lightning speed, but it happens internally. So these people are, moving their mind quicker than the mouth can keep up with. So these are very rapid fire, intuitive thoughts, but intuitive downloads, but we might not be able to express them immediately. And then when we are getting to the third zone, when again, pretty much we start slowing down, then, but it's the end of the retrogression, then I would say that the operating system is a lot more adaptable. It realizes that there needs to be a gear shift here. So there's a lot of internal processing happening there, maybe a bit of a mental stillness as well at one point, but we are more open towards what's coming next. We are more open to taking information, to digest it, and then taking it more, and then to be ready to launch something. So I hope this video helps. Sorry about that. Someone was ringing the bell. So I hope this video helps to understand how the Mercury retrograde might be functioning in your natal chart. So do let me know what phase of your Mercury you were born with. How does this resonate with you? And you can also let me know if you would like to study about something else, because I can prepare a video about that too. So thank you very much and take care. Bye bye.